It all began on a day so ordinary that it could have disappeared into memory without a trace, the kind of Tuesday where nothing extraordinary seemed destined to happen. The sky was clear, the world moved in its predictable rhythm, and I walked into that day with the same trust one always carried in my pocket, light and unburdened. I had always been one of those people who believed that trust was a gift, not something to be measured out in teaspoons or rationed like a precious commodity. To me, it was an offering, given freely, without suspicion, because I thought the world was kinder when you believed in the goodness of others. That was before I met the one who would test it, the one who wore charm like armor and deceit like perfume. At first, there was nothing suspicious about them. Their smile was easy, their words polished and gentle, their actions seemingly kind. They spoke to me in the way a person does when they want you to feel seen, when every conversation feels like a warm spotlight shining just on you. And I let myself believe in it. Why wouldn't I? Trust had always been my default, and I refused to let cynicism harden me. It began with small gestures, moments designed to weave themselves into my comfort zone. They remembered details I had shared absent-mindedly, repeated them back at just the right times. They offered help without being asked, made promises with the kind of confidence that makes you want to lean in and believe. For a while, I didn't notice the cracks, the way their words were sometimes too rehearsed, the way their stories shifted slightly depending on who was listening. I brushed it off. Everyone had flaws, I told myself. No one is perfectly consistent. But then the lies began to unravel in subtle ways. A message left unread that I knew they had seen. A promise postponed again and again until it felt like an echo of itself. Little inconsistencies began piling up, too small to accuse, yet too sharp to ignore. I started feeling the tug in my gut, the quiet instinct that whispers when something doesn't fit. Still, I try to silence it. I had always prided myself on loyalty, on believing in people longer than most would. The turning point came when I stumbled upon proof, undeniable, unshakable evidence that their words and actions didn't match. It wasn't something I had gone looking for. It was something that fell into my lap, a truth I hadn't asked for but could no longer deny. In that moment, my heart didn't break. Instead, it hardened into clarity. I saw them for what they were. Not a friend, not a confidant, but a cheat. The kind of cheat who thrived on weaving illusions, who mistook kindness for weakness, who thought trust was a door left unlocked for them to ransack. They tried, of course, to manipulate the discovery. Their voice shifted into feigned innocence, then into anger, then into guilt-tripping confessions laced with half-truths. They tried to twist the blame, to make me doubt my own perception. That was their game. They didn't just cheat. They tried to break the foundation of what you believed about yourself. They wanted me to question whether my trust had been misplaced or whether I was simply imagining things. But here's the part they didn't understand. Trust, once broken, is not weakness. It is a lesson. And I learned quickly. I stood firm, let their excuses wash over me like rain against a stone, and refused to bend. I didn't raise my voice or plead for answers. I simply withdrew the gift they had mistaken for fragility. Trust was never theirs to abuse. It was mine to reclaim. The look in their eyes when they realized they had failed was something I will never forget. They had expected tears, perhaps a breakdown, maybe even forgiveness they didn't deserve. Instead, they met silence, a boundary drawn not with anger, but with certainty. They couldn't touch me anymore, not with lies, not with promises, not with their carefully crafted charm. In the end, they walked away, though not before one last attempt at rewriting the story, painting themselves as misunderstood, as the victim of circumstance. But I didn't buy it. For once, I wasn't listening to their words. I was listening to myself. And in that quiet certainty, I felt a strength they could never break. A trust, I realized, doesn't end when someone tries to betray it. It transforms. It teaches you to see more clearly, to give wisely, and to know the difference between those who deserve a place in your life and those who don't. That day, the cheat failed miserably, not because they didn't succeed in lying, but because they couldn't take from me the one thing they most wanted to shatter, my belief that I was stronger than their deception. And so, I walked away, lighter, sharper, and far more unshakable than before. The first time I ever heard their voice, I remember thinking how easily it slipped into my life, as though it had always been waiting for a space to fill. There was no clash, no resistance, only the smoothness of someone who knew how to read a room, how to study a person's weaknesses, and how to press the right buttons without ever making it obvious. That was their power, their ability to make you feel as though they belonged, that they were inevitable. For weeks, maybe even months, I didn't notice it. Or maybe I chose not to. They played the long game, weaving themselves into my routines, finding ways to be present without ever seeming intrusive. I began to lean on them, not because I was desperate for companionship, but because they made it easy to. That's what cheats do. They don't come in with banners of betrayal or obvious deceit. They come in gently, wrapping themselves around your trust until you cannot distinguish where your faith ends and their manipulation begins. The little betrayals began so small, I almost convinced myself they weren't betrayals at all. A promise forgotten here, a slip of the tongue there. An explanation that didn't quite fit but was delivered so smoothly that I swallowed it anyway. They were good, too good at making wrong sound right, at sprinkling just enough affection into their lives to make me believe that maybe I was being too harsh, too paranoid. And I let it go. Again and again, I let it go. But the problem with cheats is that they grow careless when they think they have you. Their lies become bolder, their stories thinner, their excuses too easily rehearsed. They begin to believe their own performance, forgetting that even the most convincing actor eventually fumbles a line. That was when I started to notice. The cracks widened. A story about where they had been contradicted an earlier tale. A message meant for someone else slipped past their guard and landed in my hands. I pieced together fragments, and suddenly, the truth was staring at me. It wasn't just the betrayal of action, it was the betrayal of intention. They hadn't stumbled into dishonesty by accident. They had walked into my life with it already tucked beneath their sleeve. They thought kindness was naivety, that generosity was foolishness, that trust was nothing more than an open door they could raid at will. When I finally confronted them, I expected perhaps a flash of guilt, maybe even shame. But cheats rarely admit what they are. Instead, they double down. They spoke with all the sincerity of a seasoned liar, weaving explanations so intricate that, had I been weaker, I might have let myself believe them again. They accused me of doubting them unfairly, as though my hurt was the real betrayal. They painted themselves as misunderstood, trapped by circumstance, a victim of bad timing and misinterpretation. But I had learned by then. I had seen too much to let their words rebuild the illusion. I realized in that moment that trust isn't destroyed in one swift blow. It erodes slowly, and once it is gone, there is no charm or apology strong enough to restore it. They mistook my silence for hesitation, not realizing that silence can also be a wall, stronger than any argument. The more they tried to twist the story, the more I saw through them. I saw the patterns, the rehearsed gestures, the way they sought control not through strength, but through deception. And that was when the power shifted. They hadn't broken me. They had revealed themselves. They hadn't taken my trust. They had freed me from the illusion of who they pretended to be. In the days that followed, they tried to claw their way back into my good graces. Messages filled with regret, apologies decorated with promises, attempts to remind me of the good moments as though those could erase the rot underneath. But I didn't answer. I didn't rage. I didn't even explain. I simply closed the door they had mistaken for a weakness and left it shut. What they never understood is that trust is not a weapon in their hands. It is armor in mine. Yes, they tried to crack it, tried to bend it, tried to use it against me. But in the end, all they managed to do was expose themselves for what they truly were, a cheat who believed they could win by taking what wasn't theirs. They thought they had succeeded, but what they failed to see was that I had lost nothing. My faith in myself, my strength, my ability to rebuild, all of that remained untouched. If anything, I walked away stronger. I learned that not everyone deserves the softness of your trust. I learned that some people mistake kindness for weakness, but that doesn't mean you should harden into stone. The key is balance. to remain open enough to love, but strong enough to walk away when deception shows its face. And so, their game ended not with my ruin, but with their failure. They thought they had the final move, but they underestimated the quiet resilience of someone who knows their own worth. In trying to break me, they only revealed themselves, and in the end, I didn't lose a thing. They did. The day it all truly began, I remember the air felt heavy, though not in a way that warned of anything dangerous. It was just the kind of day where routine numbs you into thinking nothing extraordinary could possibly happen. I carried myself with that same quiet confidence I always had, trusting without hesitation, believing that the world, even with all its chaos, still made room for honesty. I had no idea then that someone had already marked me as a target, watching, waiting, planning the exact ways they would test that belief. They arrived like a shadow that pretends to be sunlight, cloaked in charm and easy laughter. Their words had a rhythm to them, a way of slipping into my thoughts and nestling there. They never rushed. That was the secret of their craft. Cheats don't sprint. They stalk slowly, circling you until you mistake their presence for comfort. That was how it began. Small kindnesses, subtle gestures, the art of making me believe they were different, that they were someone I could lean on without fear. At first, I welcomed it. Who wouldn't? When someone remembers the little things you say, when they show up at the right moments, when their voice carries that softness that makes you feel seen, it's intoxicating. I thought I had found someone rare, someone trustworthy. But trust is fragile, and cheats know exactly how to handle it. Carefully at first, so you never see the cracks, until suddenly they don't care if you notice. The lies started small, dressed up as half-truths. A cancelled plan explained with too perfect reasoning. A contradiction in a story they had told before. A silence where there should have been an answer. I felt those first tugs of doubt in my chest, but I silenced them, because trust is something you don't want to question. I told myself it was just coincidence, that no one can be perfect. But deep down, I felt the tremors. The first undeniable sign came late one night. A message, one they hadn't meant for me to see, slipped through the cracks. Just a few words, but enough to shatter the picture they had painted. I remember staring at the screen, the glow of it casting shadows across my room, my chest tightening as the truth pressed itself into me. The cheat wasn't clumsy. They were careless because they thought they owned my trust completely. That's when I knew. When I confronted them, the performance began. Their face softened with practiced innocence, their voice dripping with sincerity so perfect it almost made me doubt what I already knew. They swore, they explained, they pleaded. And when that didn't work, they turned the story around, trying to make me believe I was paranoid, that my doubts were the real betrayal. They tried every angle: charm, anger, guilt. That's the mark of a classic cheat. They don't just lie. They rewrite reality and hope you'll accept their version. But I didn't. Something inside me shifted that night. I didn't scream. I didn't crumble. I just watched them, saw them not as the person they pretended to be, but as the hollow mask they truly were. For the first time, I was silent not because I was uncertain, but because I was certain. They couldn't touch me anymore. My trust wasn't theirs to destroy. It was mine to protect. In the days that followed, they didn't stop. They wrote long messages filled with regret, carefully chosen words designed to sting just enough to make me reconsider. They reached out with promises, reminding me of moments we had shared, as if memory could erase betrayal. But it didn't work. I had seen too much. I understood now that cheats survive only as long as you let them. I didn't block them immediately. No, I let them linger, because I wanted to see the desperation peel away their practiced calm. I watched as their messages grew shorter, sharper, less controlled. The cracks in their performance spread until they weren't pretending anymore. They were scrambling. And that was when I knew I had already won. The truth is, they never broke me. They only revealed themselves. I didn't lose my faith and trust. I gained wisdom about where to place it. I didn't become harder. I became sharper, clearer, stronger. Trust, I realized, is not weakness. It is strength in its purest form, and the one who misuses it only proves how little they ever deserved it. In the end, the cheat failed miserably. They walked away thinking they had left me wounded, But I wasn't. I was free, free from their lies, free from their games, free from the illusion they had spun. What they took was nothing compared to what I gained: clarity, resilience, and a deeper understanding of my own worth. And so, the story didn't end with my heartbreak. It ended with their failure. A failure so complete that no excuse, no apology, no manipulation could ever undo it. They tried to break my trust, but in doing so, they only proved that I was unbreakable.